everybody, welcome to metalnettv. Today I am super excited to have Bane from Bane for Leather with me. Most of you know who he is, but if you don't, he is a really important figure in metal land. He is somebody who's extraordinarily talented and has made a lot of the beautiful outfits that we have seen on some of our favorite legendary metal people, as well as some of the up-and-coming folks. And so today I get to talk to him. But before I do, I just want to remind everybody to subscribe to metalnettv if you already haven't, and to make sure that you also click the notification bell, which will let you know when the videos are up. So go ahead and do that, and here we go. Hey Al, how are you doing?
Hey, what's happening?
How are you doing today?
I can't complain. It's
Oh,
a
that's
beautiful
good.
sunny day in Southern California.
I love it. I love it. So let me just take a minute to say I'm very excited to have you on because you are someone who probably don't know this, but you're very important to me because I was that kid who I discovered Poison. They were kind of the first band, Poison and Cinderella. And I loved the music, loved the energy and all of that. But the clothes in that, for that whole genre, Poison's the introduction, but the clothes in that were like so important to me. So I got into Poison, Cinderella, Motley Crue, Doro, all of these people. And it had made such an impact on me, and I needed to dress this way. So I was that kid who obviously couldn't afford any of these clothes, like couldn't even find this leather clothing or any of this. And I was so desperate to be able to dress this way that I kind of like taught myself how to sew and all this stuff. And people like you, and there were just a few others, were so impactful in creating these clothes that I would see in the magazines and on stage. But I didn't necessarily know who you were until like many years later with social media. And so I'm so excited to have you on today and be able to talk to you one-on-one, and with social media, be able to see that, okay, it's Bane. He was the one that created that jacket or that pair of pants, or like Sam Van Colton, you've recently done stuff for him. So I'm like beyond stoked to have you on because I can finally, after all these years, put like a face and a name to all these things that were like so critical to me, and like critical is maybe not the right word, but like so important to me and like my style throughout my life, and just a part of this music that I love so much. So let me just take a minute to say thank you so much for the impact that you've made on the style that's been so important to me.
Well, that's very flattering, and I hope I can somehow live up to that because, like, we're behind the scenes people over here, right?
Yep.
So the process is kind of one of those things where, like, the customers got a criteria that they need. They kind of tell me what they want, and then I help them make it happen.
Yeah.
Right. So if I make up a really cool jacket, let's say a heavy metal jacket for Rob Halford, it's Rob's responsibility to make it come to life, right?
Mm-hmm.
That mannequin over there, you put that jacket on there, it's just a weird jacket on a mannequin. But the actor has to play the role. So that's got to be a perfect match. The look and then the performance have to come together. And the lucky thing about the 80s and back in the day, we had an abundance of people that were really working to get there and to outdo the other band that was on the strip.
Yeah.
So there was this constant competition of looking better or being more outrageous or writing a better song than the other fella.
There were a lot of great characters back then. There really were. And just a lot of great like idols and heroes. So I said Poison because they just happened to be the first band that I got into. But let me just take a minute to ask you, who are some of the big bands in the 80s that you actually did dress, just so we could be clear on who the people were that you dressed?
Well, the biggest, most profound impact that I had that was on me, right? The one that affected me the most was Wasp. Okay. And it's really funny because I had no intention of being a fashion designer. Okay. I was working as a kid at Jet Propulsion Laboratory through high school. My summer job was at JPL in the maintenance department there. So I was working with the plumbers, the electricians, the machinists, all that, cleaning up and helping them through their day as that summer kid coming in to help. And I made friends with all these guys. And if I brought a G job, a government job that the government was paying to get done for me, you're not supposed to do that, they would help me with it. And I was friends with Chris Holmes in high school. And he ultimately went on to be the guitar player in Wasp, right? Him and Randy Piper play guitar. So we got to make some stuff. I don't know what it is, but I'm getting this welded. It's getting welded and it turns into a mic stand. Okay, great. So I'm helping Chris with all these weird props. And then one day we got to make a shirt. So we go take a tank top and put it on top of a piece of leather and cut it out about the shape, more or less the shape, and then kind of stitch it all together with fishing wire. Put it on, look great, take a picture. That album's still selling. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So really quick after that, people are asking me to do the same kind of stuff. And I'm loading, gear with Chris into the different nightclubs and whatever. And I wanted to look cool too. So there was Judas Priest and the spikes and all that stuff. And I wanted some for myself. So I wanted to make myself the big gauntlet thing, right? With the leftover leathers from the shirts we made.
Okay.
So, that whole saying, when all you have is a hammer, the world looks like a nail. Well, I had a grommet setting plier from Dritz. So I put some grommets into a strip of leather and then I laced it up, but that leather was soft. And when tighten up the laces, it all gathered and made this little cuff about 3 inches wide and it was all wrinkly.
Okay.
And I'm all like, oh man, doesn't look,
because you wanted it to be like,
like Judas Priest,
right?
Yeah. Or like Iron Maiden. And it turned into this wrinkly thing and it really pissed me off, but I didn't say anything. I came out of my little bedroom workshop and went out to the party in the living room and I showed my friends, look what I made. Oh, wow, that's cool. Can you make me one?
Oh, okay.
Right? So I had this little piece of leather and it turned into $300 in about an hour.
That's amazing.
Selling these designs that I was not terribly pleased with, but they thought it was great.
Right.
So, okay, you want them, I'll make them. Here you go. And then I made in about an hour and a half the salary that I had made all week as a plumber.
Right.
Right. And now people are asking me, and Wasp is taking off, and we're doing all these projects for Wasp. And at that time, I'm 18, 19 years old, and my girlfriend at the time was house sitting. So we go and sit this house just to get away from mom's house. You know how that goes. So the owners of the house that we were house sitting finally came home. We're collecting our money. Mm-hmm. And he's going through the mail. He goes, oh man, we lost a tenant. Do you know anybody who wants a store on Hollywood Boulevard? Huh. Who do I know like that? I don't. I'm just a kid here. He goes, no, you don't understand. It's a glorified mailbox. It's smaller than a broom closet. It's about 2 telephone booths side by side.
Okay.
But it's Hollywood Boulevard. And the rent's only $200 a month. Well, he just gave me $700. Okay. I got, sure, a Hollywood Boulevard mailbox. Okay. He goes, you can make a lot of money from a mail order business with that address.
Interesting.
I'm an entrepreneurial kid. Okay, let's do. And I give him the money, and he gives me a key with a little hang tag. I remember very specifically. It was a little paper clip and a little paper tag on the key with an address. So I got this key, and I'm going to go down to Hollywood from North Hollywood, Las Palmas and Hollywood Boulevard. Walk into this little mall, stick the key in the door, click, open comes the little door, and literally it's the size of my coffee table. But I'm sitting there 10 feet back from Hollywood Boulevard, from the Walk of Fame, and I'm looking at it. What can we do with this? And I'm looking out the front of this mall, and there were an average of 20,000 people would walk by that doorway every day.
Okay. And you have windows, right, Al? So you have a little bit of window, right?
There's no window. It's just a door.
It's just the door. Okay.
So you open the door.
Literally just the door.
It's a display case, basically.
Okay.
Right. So what can we do here? We need to make souvenirs. So we make a studded little bracelet with like 4 studs on it and a snap. Mm-hmm. At the peak, we were doing like 200 of them a day. Rock and roll souvenirs, get your cuff here. Yeah. And I'd have all the local kids walking around with a stick with like 20 bracelets on it. Souvenirs. They'd be walking up and down the street. Oh, thank you. Here's
Oh,
modern
nice.
version of the same thing.
Nice.
$15, 15 bucks. Hi, Pam. Pam finally woke up. So we were making these.
Okay.
But they were, instead of being an inch, they were like, 5/8 or a tiny little piece of leather, little snap. And we were selling hundreds of them out of a little itty bitty space.
Mm-hmm.
I was making more money than my pop was.
Wow.
Right? So the next door shop, we could tell that the lady was, not paying her rent because she's hiding from the landlord. So the windows are closed, and then when the manager is gone or whatever, the windows are open and she's open. She'd see him come back, boom, and closing up the shop. I knew she was going to get evicted. So that shop, we went from like 75 square feet to 500 square feet when she moved out. So we moved in there and kept the little shop as a closet. So we got a phone call from Tina Turner's people. They wanted to make a dress for Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. Remember the chainmail dress and the big headpiece and all that? So we had a hand in that. We made the dress and somebody else made the headpiece, but we made them out of aluminum rings, so it was really lightweight. So she had to come in for a fitting. So she comes in, and when she's leaving, Blackie Lawless is coming in. And they pass in the hall, and he's like, "Was that Tina Turner? Was she here to see you?" "Yeah, that was her." "Dude, what the you've made the biggest mistake of your life. How come the press isn't here?" I don't know. If he ever comes back, or anybody like that ever comes back, tell the people in the press so they can get a picture with you and her and launch your career. What the heck are you thinking? "Oh, you're right. Okay. Well, she's coming back next week." So I told Ruben Blue. Ruben had this little punk rock magazine. He was a neighbor on Hollywood Boulevard. I told him, and he goes, "Okay, I'll tell a couple of people." And then all of a sudden, the little mall was swarmed with people, and people are like, we're locking the door and people are up against the window trying to look, and that we can see the glass flexing. Oh my God. So we had to call the cops and the fire department to get her escorted out of there. So we got evicted out of the property. Can't have that kind of stuff.
So you solve one problem and you create a few others.
We moved around the corner to Selma and Hollywood Boulevard. And suddenly we no longer have a Hollywood Boulevard address, so our permit to sell in the streets gone.
Okay.
So all the little bracelets go away. So we survived on Selma for 90 days. Basically the 3 months, the first, last, and security deposit. We exhausted that and had to get out of there. And I'm going, "Oh no, what are we gonna do?" And my mom goes, "You know what? Don't worry about anything. Just bring your stuff here, reinvent what you're doing, and you'll figure it out. Use the basement of the house." Okay. Go back to Mom's house. And then I get a phone call from Bill Gazzari, godfather of rock and roll on the Sunset Strip. If we only have foxy guys on our stage or something like that. I can't remember his tagline off the top of my head, but he goes, "Hey, I want you to decorate my nightclub like the Hard Rock. Bring your stuff over and decorate my space." I'm like, okay. So we have all the merchandise from the little store. We take it over there, and he goes, "Look, this area, it's too big for a hallway, and it's too small to congregate. So I had to diminish the space by putting my stuff in there." Okay. All right. So we take a bunch of nails and hang it all on the wall. We take a hide of leather and a bunch of little clothes and a little display case with a bunch of bracelets and earrings and just trinkets and stuff. "Oh, that looks great. Good. Come back and put it away at the end of the night." Wow, that's all my money. I can't walk away from this. So we stayed all night. At the end of the night, he goes, "So how'd it go? Where's all the stuff?" He goes, "We sold it all." Oh, entrepreneurial guy, are you? So that ended up starting a relationship with Gazzari's nightclub, and we were on the Sunset Strip for 12 years. Basically, we were on and off because there was like a 1 month period there where Bill was really mad at me and I had to get out. But basically, we were there every night for 12 years.
That's great. So let me stop you for 1 second. So clearly, a few steps back, you clearly had a knack that you were able to make these bracelets. You were able to make these like stage clothes, early stage clothes for Chris Holmes and that. Was this something that you knew you know how to do, or was it just like your friend needed something and you were like, let's just figure it out together? Was this just, you were just good with your hands? You were just an automatic creative? What was going on there? And did you realize, like, did you know this is something you were going to be able to do, or were you just figuring it out as you went along?
Yes and no. It's bizarre because my dad was an executive and he was an immigrant from Peru. Okay. And he didn't want me being a tradesman in any way. He wanted me to work, gentlemen work with pens.
Okay.
A fountain pen.
That was his thing.
Okay. And here I am as a summer helper at Jet Propulsion working with all the tradesmen, coming home with dirty fingernails. Oh, well, he wasn't cool with that, And then we got the opportunity for that little store and we start growing faster than we know what to do. And my godfather, he says, you got to go to school and take some lessons on sewing stuff. Because I'd show up with something that I stitched with my little Singer sewing machine. It was a piece of junk. Because you got to learn how to do this. Otherwise, you're going to, fail at your business because you're making garbage. So he sends me to LA Trade Tech, myself, my girlfriend at the time, and my assistant Keith. We all go to Trade Tech. He pays for our education for 2 years. And business is thriving. It's growing like hand over fist faster than we can keep up with it. And inevitably, I need people to help me. So I hired my teachers and their assistants to come in. So in the daytime, they're the boss. And in the evenings, I'm the boss. Really weird telling my teacher to build it, right? Yeah. So they had us buy sewing machines. So I didn't know anything about sewing except for my dumb little Singer, right? Here I'm cranking the hand wheel. But we need this. So we went out and bought 3 sewing machines. I bought a FOF 1245, which is literally on the other side of this wall. I bought a Consew Zigzag and a Wilcox and Gibbs sew overlock machine. And those 3 machines are still here. 40 years later, those are good machines.
Those old machines, they last forever. They were made well.
Well, right. They were German and true Japanese rather than Chinese with a Japanese label on it. So that's a whole different problem. Don't get me started on that. But I still have those machines. But I didn't know really what I was doing. So we went to school, got degrees in fashion design. So I got 2 degrees, fashion design and then industrial sewing technologies, which was another.
What's that second degree?
It's about sewing systems and understanding the machinery in the manufacturing process. So you know what an overlock machine is.
Yes, I do.
They're commonly called sergers.
Yes.
Okay. And you know what a single.
And for the people at home, that's like a machine that kind of like cuts the fabric and does the edge and does the finishing and all that. I mean, that's like a generic answer.
So it keeps the fabric from fraying. You see when you cut it, it starts to unravel.
Yeah.
So the overlock stitches a loop edge. Okay. A sew overlock has a single needle alongside that loop edge. So that makes the strength. Okay. So understanding the way different sewing machines work allows you to design around the mechanics of the machine.
So does that give you expertise on the machines, or does that just make you a better designer?
Both.
Okay. So you have all these talents. You wanted to take it seriously. So you went to school, you educated yourself in many different ways, learned how to sew. You had these different opportunities and you were very entrepreneurial. So you had made a really nice business for yourself. When did you start meeting these bigger clients? Was it when you were on the at Gazzari's and meeting all these folks, or did that come like later? When did we start seeing your work in videos and when we went to concerts and that?
So Bill Gazzari gave us a leg up, right? Before that, we had that retail store, and the tourist trade was our customer. But then when we ended up at Gazzari's, the demographic instantly changed. So Gazzari's was a showcase theater. So you had your band, and the first bands were usually garage bands coming out to do their first show. Okay, but the headline act, those were usually pretty well-established bands there. There were residencies back then. So every Wednesday night, there'd be Van Halen, right? Or Shark Island. Those two bands were very influential in the Sunset Strip. I don't know if Rat did a residency there, but you'd have these bands coming in for, like Van Halen was there for a year before they got signed, right? And I mean, I don't know if you're a Van Halen fan, but those guys back then, it was all guns blazing, man. That was entertainment, and it would sell out those rooms, right? So here we have our little display, our little boutique, and 250 people inside the club and 500 of them outside between Gazzari's and the Rainbow. You'd have 500 people on the sidewalks hanging out, just sitting there, handing out their flyers, chatting with everybody. It was a phenomenon, right? So we analyzed the demographic and we go, what can we sell these folks to capitalize on our Gazzari's? The rent was not cheap. I mean, during the 80s, I was paying $1,000 a week. I mean, it was expensive. So we have to be smart and get our money back and make friends with all these people. So my girlfriend at the time worked right around the corner from where the club was. So she would leave work, and instead of fighting traffic to get home an hour away, she'd go there. She'd set up the display. I would come in a little later, closer to opening, take her to dinner, and then the club would open. But while she's there, our shop was right next door to the box office. So the wall had a little secret door to get into the box office. So rather than have the box office guy come out and hassle with the band or talk through the little window and give them their passes and stuff, they would give them to her. Okay. So the bands would come in and get their pass credentials and all that stuff with her. And there's all our cool stuff. Right? So we started doing rentals and sales. So she would run that whole aspect of what we were doing at the beginning. I'd come in all fresh and clean after and let her go home. So I'd close the club. I'd be leaving at 2:00, arrive home about 2:30, 3:00 in the morning. And she'd be gone in the morning off to her day job in a bank. So the pivot point for her was the second time she got held up at gunpoint. She says, I don't want to do this anymore. She stopped working at the bank, and we just ran the shop full time. Right? So to answer your question, we just kind of figured out what we had to do under the circumstances that we were living in. Right? All these bands, they're all up and coming, and up and coming bands are doing just that. They're climbing the ladder. We hitch our wagon to their train and go with them. You know, so out of Gazzari's, I mean, there were so many bands that started out being one thing and then evolving into another, right? Warrant being one of those bands that I don't even remember what they were before, but then we were all buddies, and they created this other band they called it Warrant, and then they got rid of one guitar player and then brought in another guy, and then suddenly there's a record deal. Well, I mean, it sounds simple, but those guys were very calculated. You know, Warrant wasn't getting any real attention until they hired a choreographer to teach them how to move on stage, and then all of a sudden, boom, blew up. Right. Another band that I saw come through there, I knew immediately during the sound check that this was about to be the thing, was the Bullet Boys. Mark Toreen, when he sound checked that microphone, I knew immediately that whatever that guy was going to do was something serious. Smooth Up I mean, come on. Like today, the Bullet Boys are a cool band, right? But back then, it was amazing to watch Mark Torine on stage. Amazing. I am telling you, like it was like God was shining a light everywhere that guy went. It was amazing. And you can see it right away. But it takes a while for these people to be able to develop their trade, right? And stagecraft is much different than musicianship, but there has to be a merging of that to really get to that next level, and it takes a lot of practice.
You just said what I think is a magic word, and you said stagecraft and being different from musicianship. I would imagine that their stagecraft and figuring out the movement and the chemistry and all of that and having the right look are really like this. And when you were watching these folks develop their stagecraft, were you inspired? Like when you saw different folks like Janie Lane or whoever getting to that moment and having kind of maybe that having an aha moment, seeing these folks hit that mark, were you kind of in your mind as a designer thinking, I kind of have a vision for this person? Or when they came to you eventually, did you already have a vision? Let's talk about what that's like when you finally worked one-on-one with an artist to develop stage clothing for them. What is that process like?
Okay, for me, I have to educate my customer to think kind of the way I do. I have to embrace what they're doing, right? I have to completely, accept what they're trying to do. But they have to look at it from my perspective too, so that we can communicate, right? So I used to use the example of the Village People. Okay. They're all individually costumed, but together they make up the Village People, right? So now people will make fun of that. I don't want to be the cop. Right? I don't want to be the fireman. But if you look at a rock and roll band and you take a crime scene, for example, you got a policeman, you got a fireman, you got maybe a detective looking, and they all look like they fit together.
Yeah.
Because they're all in city infrastructure, right? So that's kind of how I approach a band, is that there's a theme. Okay. And you might just look at Rob Zombie, for example. It's kind of like it all fits, but everybody's their own individual, right?
Yeah.
Look at Wasp, the same kind of thing, but Blackie Lawless back in the day on stage with Rob Zombie today would kind of not fit.
Right.
It's got to kind of all come together with a cohesive thing, and the wardrobe is a lot like that. We look for that theme, whatever that band is looking for. But if they don't know how to create that theme, they communicate with me and we start throwing ideas around. I often talk about the blank sheet of paper. You come to me and I start out with a blank sheet of paper and a metaphoric pencil, because we can erase a pencil. Nothing that we write down or say is set in stone until we shake hands on it. Okay, so I want to be in a post-apocalyptic heavy metal band, and I hate black. Okay. So how about gray and gunmetal or brass? How about brown and mustard? I mean, how do these colors start feeling for you? Oh, I like that color combination. And we start having a conversation, and then their creative process helps me with my creative process.
Right.
We start putting things together side by side on the table. How's that look? And how's this color look against your skin? How's that color going to react when the black light's on it? Because you know what happens with white. Don't have any lint on your black shirt, because you get a black light, it turns into speckles, right?
Right.
So all those kind of things have to be considered. And then once our relationship strengthens itself, then we can actually start looking at the big picture. Okay. Look at Sam Bam Colton. You know Sam, right? You interviewed him.
Yes, you do.
And I mean, he's got a very specific set of boundaries. It's all got to be black. It's all got to be thin. It's all got to be looking really modern in his view,
Mm-hmm.
right? But he's got criteria. When we're looking at people like Sam, we cultivate a look, and then it's my responsibility to stay within those boundaries of what that is.
Right.
Okay, I'm not going to put purple on Sam.
Right.
Everything's different hues of muted black,
Right.
but nothing really shiny.
Right.
No patent leather black.
Right. Your job isn't to convince him of something he doesn't want. Your job is to respect what he wants, but to explore that space.
Absolutely. Okay. Then there's bands like Red Devil Vortex, and they've got two new musicians in the band, new guitar player, new drummer, that has happened during COVID. So they've got a 2-year relationship, and they've been rehearsing and practicing and writing songs and doing all those things. But then Gabriel, the front man, is tall and lean and in really good shape, and he's been cultivating his look for a long time. Tall and lean, right? So everything he wears has got these lines, really deep plunging neckline, black with skin, which elongates everything, right? And deep cut armholes in tank tops, which it's another long line. And the way he wears he's got this skirt thing that he makes. It's like but it's got long fluid lines on it too. So he's 5'9", but he looks like he's 7 feet tall. Okay. Right? Because he's using the line. Now these two new fellas show up, and they've got these new clothes that I don't know where they got them, but it's all these horizontal lines.
Okay, so very different silhouette. You've got this and you've got this.
Yeah. So we got to change the horizontals to verticals. It's really simple. And we got to change those verticals into V's. Right? So we started looking at that, and then the drummer had this beard. I mean, really thin, low cropped beard, like maybe a 1/4 inch long, but it's still a beard in the line that's doing this. So now you got a forehead and a couple eyeballs bouncing around in the dark. Dude, why don't you just shave that stuff off, and then the line gets longer, and then pull your hair down and make a lower cut in the front. And all of a sudden, things are starting to look a little more vertical, a little taller.
Finding the balance. It's the Village People again. It's finding that balance between all the characters so they belong to the same story.
Right. So now they're about to do some publicity stuff for their new album and stuff like that. And I was fortunate enough to be able to help them with that.
When you were talking about the process, you started with paper, and you talked us through the collaboration, talking through what they want, what will work for them, what you can do for them, what you can offer them for choices, what works with the band. Once you get to the point where you're cutting and you're doing all your pattern working and actually working with that, talk about the fittings in that, because that's a lot of work on your end that a lot of people don't see. There's a lot of behind the scenes work where you're making patterns, cutting, fitting, and all that. Tell me a little bit about that, because people who don't do your kind of work, or who don't even sew themselves, have no idea how much labor goes into each and every piece of clothing that you make for your artists.
Okay, so I'm glad you mentioned that, because we don't own a boutique. Like if you come here, it's just a bunch of sewing machines and a bunch of materials, leathers and fabrics and boxes full of thread. So we get an idea of what we're going to make for you. So now we've got that piece of paper with a bunch of criteria. Okay. And now I go to build for it. So I'm going to turn the page over, and I'm going to measure you. So I take a tape measure and take all the particular fitting dimensions that I need to make this garment happen. Okay. So then I'll draft a pattern or go get a pattern. Like, long ago are the days of drafting a bare bones pattern from raw numbers. I'll take my generic pattern, size 32 jean, if you will, and then I'll modify that pattern to fit the particular fit, right? So somebody says they want skinny jeans, and we take all their measurements. So we take the pattern that's closest to it and then bring it in or let it out appropriately. So then I have to prove that pattern fits. So rather than cut leather right away, I'm going to make a muslin. So muslin's a fairly cheap, it's, $2 a yard, $3 a yard. And it costs us maybe $10 or $15 to mock up the sample. So we take my pattern, try it on.
Mhm.
It's a little too tight here, a little too loose there. And then we make our adjustments on that muslin, redraw the pattern, and then we can cut leather with confidence that we're not throwing away a bunch of leather.
Right.
Okay. So the first fitting measurements, or the consultation and usually the measurements at that time, then a muslin fitting. And then after the muslin fitting is done, we'll build the leather part and then try that on before all the finishing touches.
Mhm.
So now that's visit number 3 or 2 or 3, right? Come in, try it on. Oh, it fits great, great. Put the waistband on, all the belt loops, and then all the bling. Come back and pick it up. We don't have a bunch of stuff just hanging on the shelf.
Right.
Except for maybe guitar straps. We got about 75 or 100 guitar straps over there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just, again, I think I had mentioned to you before we talked that I do sew, and that, well, I mentioned this at the beginning of the interview. I just would love for people at home to know how much work goes into each and every garment, especially when it has studs and all that, because you do all of that by hand. Like, there's no magical machine that you like feed the leather coat through that just magically places all of the spangles in the right place. Like, all of that is done by hand. So for people at home who do that kind of work, they know how much like blood, sweat, and tears goes into
but
each.
there is a magic machine.
No, see, you're not supposed to say that because you.
But his name is Joe. I go, okay, Joe, here's what we're going to do. All right. And we're going to put all these studs in here. And he goes, oh, man. And then I hand it off to him.
Well,
and
then you need to send Joe my way, because I don't have a Joe. Every time I've beaded anything, it's been like.
Well, the beading department, that's Pam.
That machine is
spoils a little, yeah. And she sits there with her little hand going like this, and by the end of the day, it's beautiful.
Yeah, stunning,
right?
Stunning work. Yeah.
So those are not mechanical resources; those are human resources,
yeah.
and a good work facility, a good shop, good design room has all these elements in it, whether they be mechanical and intellectual, like my pattern library is like an intellectual library, right? And then inside my head, I know how to use all of my different tools, and then I know how to teach my helper to do the task at hand. Right? So like my stud setting machine, it's a vacuum powered, kick press, and it smashes things. But if a novice shows up and just starts kicking the press, they cut their finger off.
When I was looking at your Instagram feed, I saw something, I don't know if it would be considered an accessory, but something really cool in the guitar world, which was almost like, I don't know if you would call that a guitar plate or what, but it was like the face of a guitar that looked like leather and studs in that you had done for somebody. What are some of these other things that you're doing with leather?
Yeah, so the leather covers on guitars, there's a company called Zamitis Guitars. And they have a metal front. You may have seen Gilby Clark's Zamitis guitar. It's got a metal cover on the front, and it's got all this cool etching in it. Really beautiful guitar. Okay. A friend of mine, Dave Hager, was their national sales director, and he's given the task of creating more sales for this company where the designer of that product line died like 20 years ago. And they're trying to resurrect this product. And he's going to the NAMM show, and he doesn't have any new story to tell. The designer's been dead. These guitars, the cheap knockoffs, not the cool vintage ones, sound really tinny and kind of weird. So what if we covered this guitar? What if we took that metal plate off and put a leather plate on it? So ultimately, Zamitis Guitars hired me to make a collection of guitars. So we did a heavy metal studded one with pyramid studs, kind of resembled Judas Priest. And then we designed one for Tommy Henriksen from Alice Cooper's band with little studs, because his whole stud pattern of all his jackets, there's a theme, right? So the Henriksen, which ultimately turned into a guitar strap called the Henriksen. It's on our Reverb page. You can see those. Johnny Martin embraced the Henriksen stuff because he's friends with Tommy, and they did an album together. I think it's called Tommy, Tommy, Tommy. And you can see that stuff on a song they did, Teenage Kicks. really cool rock and roll video. It's, you know, so there's all this continuity that crosses over these different lines because people like Henriksen have established their look.
Right.
So you get Tommy as Tommy is. And if that doesn't fit you, goodbye. He's not going to go.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of cool. So the guitar thing, back to your original question, sorry for deviating off topic. This guitar company needed a leather cover or something to make the bottom end come out of the guitar a little better. We made these leather tops. We made 100 of them. They took them to the NAMM, and it was a successful product for them.
Mm.
So bring me that puzzle, let's solve it. But now we try to do those guitar tops on Les Pauls and stuff. Didn't work at all because the Les Paul has an arch top. So you take this leather and the Les Paul has an arch and a cutaway and all these things. So in compounded curves, and the leather doesn't lay there nice unless you start putting a million screws in there. And then that just kind of started looking hokey, but the Zemaitis guitar was perfectly flat, you see? So there was continuity there that was, it worked. So if you bring me a Les Paul, it probably won't work.
Okay.
You bring me one of those sawtooth guitars with the really flat faces on them, because there's one right over there, but the wood is so beautiful. Why would you cover it in leather? Right. But if you want me to,
you're down.
Yeah.
All right. Another thing I noticed about you is that you have a YouTube channel where you teach folks and some other things where you teach folks how to sew and that. How did that come about for you?
When I went to school, my godfather paid my tuition, right? Mm-hmm. And that led me to the ability to make money, right? And I wanted to pay him back, but he wouldn't take my money. Mm. Apparently, he got his education from a scholarship or a grant, something where they didn't require him to pay it back. And he paid it forward. So he did me a favor. So now he tells me that I have to pay it forward. Mm-hmm. So I had to educate somebody. Mm-hmm. Well, I don't have $50,000 to send Joe, anybody to school, right? So I operate this sewing channel in the hopes of paying it forward. Mm-hmm. Okay, I help you, you help somebody else, and everything's better. So that tips and tricks channel, my YouTube channel, it's all sewing stuff for people that need to know that stuff so that they can prosper in their careers.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And I'll share that information below this video so that they can find the Facebook group as well as your YouTube channel.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Right. We invite anybody.
That's awesome. And so my last question for you is, what advice do you have for folks who are interested in doing the kind of work that you've done in your career? Do you have any advice that you would offer for somebody that wants to be a designer?
Okay. A designer, that's a gigantic
It's very general.
thing.
It is very general.
It's a really wide-ranging topic, and it's only limited by your imagination, right? But imagination can get too out of control. Okay, so focus on one thing and do that one thing really well. My friend Joe, he interned with me about 2 years ago. He makes really beautiful bags. I mean, some really nice bags. He took a couple, 3 or 4 skills and made them his. And now those things are yielding really beautiful product. Okay, so now today we're pattern making jackets. Joe doesn't know the first thing about a jacket, right? But he's learning the process. So after this project that we're doing, he's going to be very intimately aware of how the jacket pattern works, how the leather works, how the assembly of the jacket works, and then he's going to be able to make cool jackets for his audience, which is clearly not my demographic. His audience is a whole different group of society. They're all higher end, beautiful, ritzy, formal looking folk. And he'll be able to market those products to his people along with what he already does. So his skill building for his bags will turn into jackets. And over time, he'll be able to make really, really nice high-end jackets or shirts. And then that can transition to a vest. And then that vest can transition to a lady's skirt, because the skills aren't too separated. But the intimacy with the one thing is key. People start making stuff and they start doing a million things, and then like nothing's really well done. So get really good at one thing. When people start making leather, make belts. Go buy a hide of leather, make 25 or 30 belts out of it. That's 40 straight lines. Just sew it. Right? 180-degree turn. If you can't do a 180-degree turn even, you're not going to make a wallet with 4 90s in it.
There you go. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I enjoyed our conversation, and I would love to have you back again.
Anytime you want. Thank you so much for letting me talk about my favorite subject.
That's great. Well, thank you again, and I will talk to you really soon.
All right, take care.
I hope you enjoyed this interview with Bane. Make sure that you're subscribed, make sure you like this video, and make sure you share this and other videos from metalnettv with your fellow metalhead and rocker fans so you can spread the word about this channel. I'll see you next week. Until then, have a great week and take care.